we're talking about Saturday, August 20th, 2005. And he's screaming and hollering at me all day, and it was just about, you know, going to going somewhere where someone wasn't coming to Maine first, and who the heck did they think? And he was on and on and on. I got on my knees that day and begged him to please stop. I wanted to, and it was just swearing and abuse and whatever. And then I said, I can't take it anymore. I went into the bathroom. I had some painkillers. I had them in my hand, and I looked at him and I said, as sad and depressed and as lonely as I feel, I don't want to die. So I flushed him down the toilet. And then in my last hope that he would understand, I explained to him what I had done. He left the room and he came back with a gun. And I can still hear those cylinders spinning. And he said, Mary Lou, he said, I'll show you how to put a gun to your head and be successful committing suicide. And now this is the crazy part. And if you haven't experienced domestic violence, it's hard to comprehend that an intelligent human being didn't do something about it. So finally put the gun down. I went to call my therapist, and I didn't know how to do her paging. I didn't get it right. So that it just all ended. And we had a knack of when things happened, we could switch it off. And so he said, "You gonna go to the movies?" And so I actually went to the movies with him that day, and the March of the Penguins, and the theater was so full. That was the first hint of things changing, and that we had to sit in separate seats. And so we did that, and then he actually went to 5 o'clock mass. And then that day, I mean, it's just like, Mary Lou, really? But I was still in my abnormal life. So the next day I was at my computer and he walked by and he had a suitcase and he said, I'm leaving you and you'll never see me again. Well, I heard that quite a few times. And I went into my sunroom and his words rang with me. I'm leaving you and I'll never see you again. And I said, no, Mary Lou, enough. And I said, Charlie, I'm leaving you, in quotes, and you'll never see me again. And I was crying. I mean, I just packed a little carry-on suitcase. I called my daughter and asked if I could go to her house. And she said, Mom, of course you can. But, you know, she didn't take it too seriously. Because I had never really left. But I always, you know, I'd go back, whatever. And she said, of course, Mom, you're welcome here. And you can stay as long as you need. And I packed my bag. And this is the part that I think, in my mind, shows the finality of it. I drove my car out of the garage, and the garage door slowly closed. And I remember looking there, crying, you know, not knowing what was going to happen, and saying, I'm never, you know, I might have gone back later to get things, but physically and mentally, I was never going to go in that house again. It was pretty amazing. I was 65 years old, and I really didn't care about my age. I didn't care what I had skills to teach. But I didn't care what I had to do, and who knew I was done. And I left that day, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow. What would you? That's incredible. I mean, you know, especially at 65, with, you know, I think, you know, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the narrative we tell ourselves when faced with that decision, because I know. Or I would imagine, I guess I'll say, maybe it's a better question than for me to imagine. You know, were there times in the 43 years preceding that when you had tried to muster up the courage, when there had been some incident? Because I know, you know, one of the things that I try to explain to people is we do things in pattern because we get payoffs from them. And, you know, when you have this narrative of peace at any cost, or that there's something I can do to control this, then there's no real ingrained reason to leave, because you always believe there's something you can do. You've gotten into this habit of patching things over and writing the next act of the play, you know, in hopes that it'll be better. And I can, you know, there were several instances that I remember, whether it was him, you know, trying to run me over in the station wagon before a freshman orientation in college, or putting a 45 caliber pistol to my head. I mean, those were incidents that occurred in my life, and I think people will be surprised to know that you went right back. You know, kind of like you were saying, you went to the movies. You went back to take care of him. You had lived in this pattern of, kind of, you know, putting the frosting
Mhm.
on top of this rotten cake for so long. Were there times before this that you had thought I should leave, or was this the first time that you really had? I mean, obviously you had the
I think
conviction
it
this
was the
time.
first, yeah. I mean, I might have thought about it. I sometimes wishing he was dead,
Uh,
but and then that incident with the gun to your head on that Christmas night, Charlie left and went right back to college. But I was here with my mother, who had Alzheimer's, and three of my children, and I didn't know where to turn. Now I should have called the sheriff. Instead, I called the family doctor, who was part of the old boys club. And this is how ridiculous this was. I called him and he said, Mary Lou, and we were at Sevago Lake on a dirt road, 6/10 of a mile on a dirt road. He said, why don't you take your mother and the kids back and then drive back? Now it's icy and snowy and sleety, and the road is sheer ice, and come back and be with Charlie. Now that was the advice from the family doctor. And and you know, I took it. I brought my mom back, and I went back into that dark house. There were 6 houses on the road, but everyone was gone because they were gone for the winter. Charlie, that just shows how my brain worked, how I didn't see even the danger I was in, going to be into that house with him with a gun, and I still went back in there because didn't want to ruin his bad name, his good name. Pardon me. That was a Freudian flip. Yeah, it was a pattern. It was his power and control, and there was nothing in me to fight him. I didn't think I had anything in me to fight him. Today it's different.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that, because it does show the pattern of our minds. And it's interesting because you were younger and probably stronger the night of that incident than you were when you actually left him, having been a few years older, and
Hmm.
having a lot less, kind of vested there. But you still had the courage to change the way you thought, and change what you did. And let's, maybe, for the benefit of anybody who's listening or wants to share this with somebody who they see trapped in a domestic violent relationship, controlling, manipulative, where they're losing themselves. And maybe, if you could share a couple of, the bright red warning signs, and then, the things that you and Finding Our Voices and the other advocacy groups share about the importance of leaving. But let's start with what those warning, that, this, and I think you've done a great job, Mom, of outlining, the manipulation, the control, the losing of yourself. I think one of the most important things, when you feel like, you're the essence of who you really are as a woman or a man, whichever the case may be, is being eroded at the hands and control of another person. What other warning signs can you share with people?
Isolation. If
Uh,
they keep you isolated from your friends. I would talk to my children on the phone, and he would just want to listen to the conversation, or he would also tell them when the kids would call that your mother's not home or your mother's sleeping. So if you feel like you're being isolated, and and also the fact that they want to know where you are, what you're doing, and when you're coming back, and and this was another thing, managing money, being in charge of money. I mean, my ex would spend $500 if we had $1 bill, and I would go shopping and spend $20, and we can't afford that shit. And so, yeah, just manipulating your money. And I was working. I mean, I was bringing in an income, and again, I lost myself in that. So isolation, financial control, you know, controlling who you can speak with and on the phone, are just a few things I can think of, Charlie.
Wow. Well, how courageous, and I'm just amazed at what you're doing today. And if you could talk a little bit about, the overcome part of this now, where
Mhm.
you kind of put the fear aside, and I mean, I think people will say everything good in life happens on the other side of fear. And you've been facing these fears, for so many years, and finally, decided to walk through and face those fears and watch that garage door come down. Can you maybe help the people listening with that decision and the kinds of things that empowered you to leave, and how you and Patricia and the other advocacy groups that you work with are encouraging and supporting women in domestic violent relationships to not wait so long and to become empowered to to overcome their situation and change?
I can only speak for myself, okay? And what happened to me once I left, I started getting the help I needed. Then I had to make a choice. Am I going to sit around and feel sorry for myself, or am I going to create a new life? And so I remember in California, I had my little notebook, and I'd write goals that I set goals for myself of what I needed and what I wanted to accomplish, and then go out and reach for them. And in California, I volunteered at the children's school. I went to senior college, as well as doing therapy, and then I went and give to others. I think that I started volunteering. Am I answering your question, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. I mean, I think all of those things are empowering choices.